Hey, fellow writers. In this video, I'm going to explain the 5 mistakes that many first-time writers make when they're writing their first book. I've taught classes on how to write and publish books, and many of these are mistakes I've seen my students make. So I want to tell you about them, so hopefully you don't make these mistakes. Mistake number 1 is setting unrealistic goals. Before I show you what an unrealistic goal is, let me tell you what is realistic. When you write your first book, it's very realistic that you can publish that book on platforms like Amazon, on Barnes & Noble's website. You can get your book published on those sites very easily. Another very realistic goal is to write a book that's around 100 pages. For most authors, it's very reasonable that their first book is going to be a relatively short book. And then finally, it's very realistic that you're going to enjoy the process. And I'll give you a few tips on how to enjoy it. What's not realistic is expecting your first book to be in every bookstore you walk into. That's very uncommon that first books are going to be that popular. It's also not very realistic that you can write a first book that's 500 pages or more. Some of my students feel like, I want to write this epic novel, and you could do that. I wouldn't recommend it for your first book, because if that's your goal, there's a good chance you're going to run out of steam along the way. And then finally, it's not very realistic that you're going to make a lot of money on your first book. When it comes to where your book can be published, most online publishing platforms now will publish your book for free because they want your content. It's very realistic that as a first-time author, you can publish your book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, Google Books, Kobo, and a lot of other platforms, because those booksellers want your book. They want to publish your book, and they'll let you publish it for free in exchange for them having the rights to sell your books. In terms of what's realistic for the length of your book, you might think, oh, 100 pages, that's way too short. I want to write a longer book. Well, think about it. Some of the best books ever written were fairly short books. The Art of War, for example, is one of the best-selling military books ever written, and it's only 68 pages long. There's a really popular business book called Who Moved My Cheese, and it's under 100 pages. Even authors like John Steinbeck wrote books like Of Mice and Men. That was only a little over 100 pages long. If you go up on Amazon and you search for a book called Challenging Goliath, what you'll find is one of the books written by one of my very first writing students, and it's only 116 pages. It's getting great reviews from customers because a lot of people like books that are that short. You might be thinking, hey, there are masterpiece books that are huge, so I want to write the next War and Peace. Well, War and Peace is over 1,300 pages long. If you take on a book like that, it might be like what Tolstoy experienced. It took him over 6 years to write that book. I don't recommend that for your first book. Write something smaller, get used to writing smaller books. And you might say, well, Stephen King writes long books. Under the Dome is over 1,000 pages long. Yes, but Stephen King also writes short books. He's got a book that is 128 pages. He's got another book that's 132 pages. So even great writers write short books, and that's a great place for you to start. If you're worried that readers might be upset that the book is short, well, there are things you can do about that. If you call your book a novel, readers are going to expect it to be long. Typically, readers want a novel to be over 200 pages. If you call it a novella, then you're telling readers it's going to be a short book, and it's intended to be that way. Most novellas are around 100 pages. If your book is under 30 pages, that may not be a book. That might be a short story. If you enjoy writing short stories, it's okay to group several short stories together and turn that into a book. The only minimum requirement for a book is if you want to publish your book on Amazon using Amazon's publishing platform, it has to be at least 24 pages long. That's very manageable. You might want to make it a little longer than that just so readers feel like they're getting what they're paying for. The next realistic goal is to enjoy the process. I love writing books. I love publishing books. I've written 6 books. I've self-published all 6 of them. And what I found is it's a really good conversation starter. If somebody asks what you do in your spare time, it's fun to say, oh, I'm writing a book. And people will light up and they'll ask you questions. And it's a great way to meet new people, to have something to talk about. It's also very enjoyable to be in writers groups. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about writers groups later in this video. And then finally, I really enjoy taking writing classes, and I really enjoy teaching writing classes. So if you want to set one of your goals as enjoying the process of writing and publishing, that's very realistic goals. Now let's talk a minute about money. You might think, oh, I really want my goal to be to make a lot of money. There is a way to make money writing books, but don't expect that you're going to be able to retire after writing your first book. Here are 3 ways you can make money by writing books. The first one is write a series of books. This is what a lot of professional writers do, is they might write 6 or 8 or 10 books. They'll give away the first book and then encourage readers to buy the second, the third, the fourth book, to buy the entire series. And that's a great way to make a little money writing books. Another way is use your book to establish credentials. So if you want to go into coaching, or if you want to go into consulting, or you want to go into a certain profession, write a book about that profession and then show people the book. That will make sure they see you as a credible source for providing those services. And then finally, another way to make money writing books is to write books and blogs. What I'm currently doing is I'm writing a book with 32 short chapters. Each of those chapters will be a blog. I'm going to post those blogs on my website, and then I'll get advertisers to advertise on my site, because my website will be getting traffic from people reading those blogs. So you can turn a book into a blog. You can turn blogs into a book. That's a really nice way to make a little money on your book. Mistake number 2 is choosing the wrong publishing method. And many first-time writers feel like they want to be published by a traditional publishing company. That might not be realistic, especially for your first book. Traditional publishing might be realistic if you are extremely famous. So if you have millions of followers, or if you've done something that is absolutely incredibly newsworthy, then a traditional publisher might be interested in you. The downfall of traditional publishers is if you're not famous and you don't find some way to get in with them, there's a good chance that they will never accept your book. Some of my students have been trying for years to get a traditional publisher to publish their book, and it's not happening because traditional publishers publish very few books relative to the number of submissions they receive. So a route some people go down is finding a hybrid publisher. Hybrid publishers are companies that will charge you to publish your book. And if you pay them enough money, they will publish your book. The challenge is you have to pay them enough money. It typically takes thousands of dollars for a hybrid publisher to agree to publish your book for you. The third method is much easier and much less expensive. It is self-publishing. And because those publishing platforms like Amazon and Draft Digital and other companies are looking for content, you can self-publish for free, and their websites are relatively user-friendly. So more and more first-time writers are choosing to publish through self-publishing, and it's working very well for them. Mistake number 3 is letting other people choose your book topic. And I've seen students of mine that come in and they say, hey, my mom thinks I should write this book, or oh, my daughter says I should write this book, or a friend says I should write this book. Forget about what other people tell you to write about. They're not going to be the ones who are actually putting words on a page. You need to write about something that you are interested in. And here are 3 ideas on what you could write about. You could write your first book about a hobby you love. So if you love cooking or traveling or investing or something else, write about it because you already have that interest. That's going to keep you motivated as you write. Another idea is write about knowledge that you want to share with people. So my first book was about marketing because I was in marketing and I wanted to teach new marketers how to do it. So it's much easier to write your first book about a subject that you know a lot about than it is to pick a subject you don't. And finally, you could write a book that is a story that excites you. So if in your imagination you have a story, maybe you have a romance, maybe you have a fantasy story, maybe you have a science fiction story, that's a great thing to write about, especially if it's something that you think about quite a bit. What you don't want to do for your first book is don't write about something you know very little about. You don't want to pick a topic that's new to you because conducting all of that research and learning about it is going to slow you down and it could take away your momentum. And then again, don't pick a topic that someone else wants you to write about. They're not doing the writing. You are. It needs to be your topic. It needs to be something that's going to keep you motivated. Mistake number 4 is going it alone. There are a lot of writers who think, I have to write this by myself. It has to be all me. And that's really hard to do. Writing takes a long time, it takes a lot of effort, and it helps to have other people encouraging you along the way. What I want you to consider is find other writers or find freelancers or find an accountability partner who can help you get through the writing process. Other writers are a great source of inspiration. They're a great source of knowledge. So what I recommend is find a writers group. There could be a writers group in your local community. You could find a writers group on a social media platform and join the group. You can also take a writing class. I teach a writing class at SMU through their continuing education program. In your community, there might be a college, there might be a community center, there might be a class available through your local library. When you take classes like this, you'll find encouragement, you'll find advice, and it really helps you write your book in a way that you might not be able to write it if you do it all by yourself. And finally, consider getting a writing partner. And there are really two formats that I like for writing partners. One is get a co-author who can help you write your book, or get another author who's writing their book. You can help them when they need help with their book, and they can help you when you need help with your book. Another place to get help on your book is through freelancers. I love freelancers. You can find people to do anything you want, including they can give you writing coaching, they can edit your book, they can provide formatting, they can make a book cover for your book. So rather than trying to do all of these things yourself, there are some wonderful freelancing sites like Fiverr, like freelancer.com, like Upworks, and you can go to those sites and find people with expertise to help you write, edit, and publish your book. Another option is to get an accountability partner, and this is someone who holds you accountable for writing your book. So you might tell them your goal, and you might say, hey, this week I'd like to write 1,000 words. And they may be like, all right, let's put it on the calendar. A week from now, I'm going to check in with you, and I'm going to make sure that you've written your 1,000 words. I've even heard people say they will pay an accountability partner if they don't meet their goals. And it could be something simple like $10. And you could say, hey, if I don't write 1,000 words this week, I owe you $10. And that holds you accountable. So people that make good accountability partners are friends, family members, neighbors, colleagues, anybody you can keep in contact with on a regular basis who will check in and make sure you're meeting your writing goals. And mistake number 5 is demanding perfection every step of the way. There's a famous quote from Winston Churchill, and it's one of my favorite quotes, and it is, perfection is the enemy of progress. And that's especially true when you're writing a book, because if you want every word to be perfect and every sentence to be perfect and every piece of punctuation to be perfect, you will never finish your book. The best thing to do when you're writing a book is think about your first book as your first recital. So if you're learning to play the piano, you don't expect for it to be perfect the first time. What you'll do is you will sit down at the keyboard, you'll tap on the keys, you might get a coach to help you, you might practice a lot, and then you will eventually get good enough that you're ready to have your first recital. Writing a book's exactly like that. You're going to sit down at a keyboard, you're going to start tapping on the keys, you're going to start generating content, and over time, that content will get better the more you practice. And eventually, that content's going to be ready to share with other people. That's like going to a recital. That's like publishing your first book. Another way of looking at it is the first draft of your book is just raw material. It's not perfect. It may not even be good, and that's okay, because you need that raw material to go into the editing phase. And the editing phase is when you put it all together and you create your finished product. So as you're writing, just get the content out. As you're editing, then make it better. And then finally, one more thing to consider is writing more books equals writing better books. So I recommend on your first book, just get through the process. Dump the content out of your head into a first draft, go through the editing cycle and make it better, publish the book, and then you will learn so much through that in your second book, you will write a better book. In your third book and your fourth book, you could get hooked. I absolutely got hooked. As I said, I've written 6 books. I'm working on my 7th one. There may be no end to them. You may find the same thing, provided you don't hold yourself to that standard of perfection. Let's recap the 5 big mistakes that most first-time authors make before I show you the bonus content. The first mistake is setting unrealistic goals, then choosing the wrong publishing method, choosing other people's topics to write about, not your own topic, going it alone and not getting help from writers groups or accountability partners or freelancers, and demanding perfection rather than accepting that especially the first draft is a first draft and then you're going to refine it throughout the editing process. The big thing to remember when you're writing your book is have fun with it. If you love to write, then enjoy the process. Writing my first book was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, and hopefully it will be for you too. Just go back and make sure you're not making these mistakes, and you'll find that it's much easier to get the book written.